What's up, LEC community? Good to see you. Good Thursday afternoon. I think it's Thursday. Is that right, Susanna?
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think it's Thursday. For today's edition of Ask an Educator, we actually want to hear from our community on school reopenings. We have heard a lot of concern within our community around what next steps are, and so we are here holding space um, to really kind of see what the needs are of our community and to understand better how we can be supportive.
Yeah, I think the way Edgar and I envision leading the organization is always based on what our community needs and wants at the moment. And right now, this is obviously leading the conversation. And so, however it is that we can support classroom teachers, administrators, really anybody in education to transition well into whatever August looks like. We know that there is still a lot of uncertainty. Very few districts or schools have like definitively said and made a plan, but we want to open the space for you to share your anxieties, your thoughts, your questions, your wonderings. So yeah.
And also, how can we help? And I think that that's something that we are trying to figure out, because clearly one thing that we can do is elevate the voices of our community. We asked a couple of questions earlier today on social media, I think on Twitter and on Instagram, to see if teachers' opinions and voices have been included in the school reopening discussions. And so I know that we've had some engagement on that. What have we learned so far, Susanna?
Yeah, we have had some engagement, which is exciting with such like short turnaround. But on Twitter, we have hashtag Latinx Ed Chat. So check out that hashtag when you get a chance because it'll be us. Classroom teachers, has your input been sought in your district's reopening plans? 60% of voters said yes, and 40% said no. So it's about even there. On Instagram, our poll is still up and live, so feel free to participate. We have 75 that said yes and 25% that said no. So 60% and 75% isn't bad.
I think one of my concerns is really around. There seems to be a lot of fear as well. A lot of health concerns for our teachers. That's something that's been elevated a couple of times. If you are joining us and know this today is about you and making sure that we're elevating your voice in your conversation, so feel free to comment. We're going to absolutely raise your comments up today and make sure that your voices are being heard. Um, but I've seen a lot of questions around. I've heard some rumors that teachers are also exiting the profession because of just the way that things have been handled. A lot of inconsistencies just in our area around what schools are deciding to do and what not to do. Yesterday, we got a little bit more information from the state of Kansas saying that schools would not reopen until after Labor Day, and so not a lot of consistency around what's going on. I asked you this question earlier today, Susanna. How does it feel? You're not going back into the classroom this fall. How do you feel about that?
Um, yeah, my husband and I had that discussion last night. And the feeling really is of relief that I personally don't have to make that difficult decision because my husband, next month, I'd be 7 months pregnant. And my husband was like, I don't know that I would not necessarily let me go, but he wouldn't be comfortable with um, me having our son, right, and my immunocompromised self in the school. And so it kind of just aligned itself. This obviously, my leaving the classroom was before COVID. And so this wasn't a decision that was made out of COVID. But it's it's sad because leaving the classroom in general is sad for me. It's mostly been a sadness thing. But now, my husband was like, if you were going back, you'd probably be leading the strike. I'm kind of glad that I that's not on me right now. However,
Yeah.
I know with the LEC and with the amount of people that we support, I'm still in the same kind of mindset. Like, um, where where is the concern for teachers? I we with the polls we took, it does seem that districts either sent out surveys or somehow are getting the input from their classroom teachers. But there's a lot of articles and talk around the kids' health, um, which of course is also a priority, right? But we also have teachers, administrators, counselors, janitors, lunch cafeteria workers who are immunocompromised. So what does that look like? You know?
It's a lot to think about, and I think that there's also a tension as well because some parents, potentially need the help. They've been navigating being teacher and parent all at the same time, and so there's this urge to kind of take your kids and put them back into the classrooms. And some people have to make that choice between livelihood and life. Sometimes, unfortunately, and so it's just interesting to see this time. I know one of my comments earlier today, and I could be wrong, but one of my comments was like, it's good to see Kansas take such a definitive choice or definitive action step, but I'm also questioning whether 2 weeks is an additional 2 weeks is enough time, right? Is that enough time to continue on and to make the plans and to elevate it, or are we just playing a long-term waiting game, where like every couple of weeks we're just going to go ahead and add an additional 2 weeks when we don't go back to school as well? And so, again, community, we want to hear from you today on your thoughts on school reopenings. A lot of the stuff I've heard is not necessarily positive, but are there some educators out there who are excited about the return to school? I'd love to hear your voices as well on this, because we're wanting to make sure to hold community, to hold space for these conversations, but also to really understand like the needs of our community and how best that we can support as an organization.
You mentioned something that I agree with. Like, as a teacher, I would want nothing more than to go back in the classroom in August. I mean, it just in a real, like being real, being honest, is that I would love, like I told you earlier, like virtual teaching was like not for me. And I think it also was sprung on us. So there's that. The article for Platica this week also said, like, okay, if online learning isn't sprung on us this time, like not 2 weeks before we're going to go to online learning in August, then perhaps I can prepare mentally for it. But because districts are, kind of delaying us knowing what's going to happen, as a teacher, July is my lesson planning month. And so I'm already thinking, I'm sure teachers are already working really hard, but that there's stuff left up in the air because you're like, am I going to be posting stuff online or am I going to be in person?
Right.
But I understand. I'm going to move and talk, but I understand that, not only understand, I sympathize that as teachers, we want nothing more but to be in the classroom with our students.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's if you're a teacher, you're more than likely you're in the classroom because you want to be, and you want to be with students. We have some comments from the community. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your voices with us. Matt, good to see you today. It was very difficult to continue the learning at the heavier hands-on CTE programs this spring. We will have to have some context to at least get supplies. That's very true. Some of the type of learnings that our kids are accustomed to or used to will, in order to do them well, you're going to have to be in person, because a lot of that's relationship building and a lot of around that. We also have Ruth. Ruth, thanks so much for joining us. A teacher on TikTok said, "Some of us are going to die. We just will." That is a heavy statement right there. I don't think people understand. We want to go back. It's just not safe. Thanks for sharing that in a powerful statement right there. And then Martin, to see you. I think we need either to conduct an online semester or a hybrid one until this COVID thing calms down. Um,
I think um, we had a post earlier this week. I think it was Monday,
yeah,
where we asked teachers just to comment like what your thoughts are, and I think 100% of those comments were, "I would love to be in the classroom, but I don't feel safe." And so I I will say that with virtual teaching, again, looking past, which like maybe we shouldn't, but um, it was really hard to it was really hard to
part of the reason virtual teaching was hard was the fact that you have
exactly.
interactions and interruptions at home.
Exactly.
Um,
And I'm lucky because my mom lives with us, and so she's older, and like we don't have kids. We don't have school age kids. I mean, my dogs, every once in a while you hear them bark and stuff, but there's no distractions at home. For a lot of our kids who have siblings, who have baby brothers and sisters, who live with their grandparents, their aunts and uncles. I think one of the things that was most difficult for me as a teacher to do was just gauge the wellness of my students.
mm,
Um, when we're in the classroom, we I'm monitoring your moods. I'm monitoring your well being, right? Your mental well being, your physical well being, your um, just the way, like, are you? It sounds crazy, but like, have you been gaining weight or losing weight really quickly, right? So, like, as a teacher,
yeah.
just all those things that are red flags that we really missed. But first and foremost, like was mentioned, like some of us are gonna die. Like that's
I
you
mean,
know
I think that speaks to a lot of systemic issues, systemic racism in particular, where certain families and certain communities had to make that decision of livelihood versus life, and so that's an issue, a root cause issue that we also have to address, which is nobody should be in a position to have to choose between one thing and the other, and we should be obviously that's hopefully that goes without saying. Dr. Wade, thanks for joining us. I'm gonna call you Doctor because I think I saw that. I could be wrong there. Virtual school for 4 kids, ages 5 to 10. It's too much. Um, I don't. I can't imagine. I think that we learned a lot at the end of last semester, obviously, with what's going on and the struggles, the concerns around student engagement, and the situation hasn't gotten, I would say, any better. We still don't know. We know a little bit more about COVID, but we still don't know everything about it that we need to. We don't are not any closer to a vaccine. We are not practicing social distancing and wearing masks, and we're making it a political conversation versus one of community welfare. And so I think it's a really interesting time to say, here we go again. Like we have this calendar that we have to meet, and we have 100 and some odd days that our students need to be in school, and so all those tensions happening at the same time, and no one having a really good answer. I'd love to learn from our community a little bit. If you felt like your voices were heard, or let me ask you this question differently. Um, what do you wish districts were doing? Like if there was one thing right now that you wish districts were taking into consideration, what would that look like, or what would that be? Because I'm absolutely interested, because I think obviously administrators are working hard to try to figure out what the best solutions are, or what the maybe least worst solutions are. But what do you think that districts should be doing um, in order to better support teachers?
While we wait, or do you have something coming up?
Yeah, actually, so
Yeah.
Tara, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tara.
Conversation last semester was not virtual learning. All right, It was emergency learning. We made plans in a rush and genuinely attempted to support our students for something no one ever experienced. Absolutely true.
Absolutely. I think that those were the sentiments of that thing I had seen where someone said, like, tell me now if it's online learning or virtual learning, so as a teacher I can prepare my lessons and make sure it doesn't feel like emergency learning. I forgot what I was going to say, but I did pull up the Time article. With no end in sight to the coronavirus, some teachers are retiring rather than going back to the classroom. So in New York City, they gathered some data. He says that, or the person in the article, her district shut schools on March 12th, and 55 staff members have since tested positive for the coronavirus. This person who they're talking about is going to retire early after 28 years. Luckily, she is eligible for partial retirement benefits. But here's the statistic. According to a USA Today Ipsos poll conducted in late May, about 20% of teachers say they aren't likely to return to teaching if schools reopen in the fall. 20% of teachers? I got to reread that because that's a lot. Yeah. So EdWeek Research Center conducted a different study that said 10%. So between 10 to 20% of educators said they will retire rather than go back. That's an emergency. That's a public emergency, you know?
You know, I also question from a Latinx education collaborative perspective, our mission is to increase the representation of Latinx educators in K-12.
Exactly.
I question what percentage of those teachers are actually Black and brown too, you know, and is that also a disproportionate number? So are we actually going to be losing Black and brown educators as well? I've heard some comments on the contrary that we will gain more Black and brown teachers because of the opportunities that are available, but also they're also navigating into very difficult waters as well. And so a lot of tension within those conversations as well. It's I don't know any other good word to describe just the nature of where we stand today. But today's Ask an Educator is for our community. We want to make sure we're elevating your voices, that we are understanding your concerns. And if you also have any solutions or any ideas on how to improve the process or what you want to be hearing from districts, please let us know, because we're having conversations with folks as well that we can help inform and help elevate your voices to these folks and maybe take from a different perspective as well.
We our plan for the future, Edgar, for the LEC is some advocacy work, right? And so if we get teacher perspectives on and educator perspectives on perhaps things that they feel like they can't say or they're not comfortable saying to their administration or to their districts, if we gather enough of that data and enough of those thoughts, that's something we can share on your behalf. I know we have some engagement and comments, right?
Yeah. So real quick here, Martin, I hope the district's plan for student safety and meal support for students. Absolutely. Those are some issues that we saw at the end of last year, I guess. That's the right way to say it. Latasha, thanks so much for joining us. Our district did a great job with virtual learning in March. It almost felt they were prepared for it. However, I'm disappointed that our district has announced a reopen plan of only traditional face-to-face. I don't think they are considering the emotional impact that will occur when we still have to explain to our children that a teacher has died while still expecting them to return to school and learn after that. That's scary and traumatic. And she further goes to say, as a therapist, I'm curious if our perspectives have been considered at all. Yeah, that's what we're here to discuss. You know, I think that a lot of the sentiment within or at least our Facebook page and social media is that concerns are there, and that the longer that we go into the summer, the more it feels like teachers' voices are not being considered in this. There's also a couple of articles flying around not positioning teachers against parents. That this is not, this shouldn't be a place where parents and teachers disagree. That this is a place where we can find unity in those conversations. That's for teachers who happen to be parents, what are you struggling with as well? I'd love to hear those perspectives as well, because clearly there's a lot of intersectionality that happens there. And so concerns for your own job, concerns for your safety, concerns for the safety of your own children. I'd love to hear that perspective as well. Susan, are you still with us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was actually switching tabs because I have an article up right now that is in my queue of articles that I'm reading, and it's titled "We Can't Let Parents and Teachers Be Pitted Against Each Other in This COVID Decision." I know as a teacher, that's oftentimes one of the struggle points is the fact that we, what's the right word? I guess we receive the brunt of, is that the right word? Like the brunt, or like we're the middleman of like all these decisions that get told to us.
Yeah.
And the struggles that parents have with those decisions, right? And so as educators, as teachers, you almost have to receive some of that coaching and that training to be able to kind of filter out what are some of the things that I need to handle as teacher, or that administration needs to handle, or how to approach those conversations. Because my mom actually said it the other day, because through my experience as a teacher, I'll share with her my experiences, and she said, do you think that if kids get hurt or kids get sick, parents will blame teachers? And my mom asked me that because, there were times I've told her stories where parents are upset with teachers when the decisions oftentimes are made higher up, right? And so it was just interesting how my mom, who really isn't super involved in the education system, even her thought was like, I just hope teachers don't get the blame, right? And I don't know if those are the right words to use, but it definitely isn't the time for parents and teachers to kind of go against each other.
I want to bring in go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was bringing the comment. PJ, thanks so much for being with us today. What needs to happen? Needs-based and comprehensive questionnaire for parents and teachers with a 100% result rate. See Kaufman's survey. Postpone start of school so the data can be collected and reviewed to make the best plan. I think that's something that we talked about on the coalition on Monday night a little bit, which is would it be possible just to stop and maybe shift a little bit or take some time to better understand these situations and to not feel forced to make decisions, or I don't know. Because I also see the perspective of parents as well, right? Because a lot of folks have to make decisions.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're good. I was like,
I'm sharing.
I never get to hear my voice outside of my brain, and so that to me is a win. And also, like, I apologize to everybody that has to hear my voice consistently, because that's a lot. But yeah, just really the concerns of parents that have to go back to work and that may not, let's be frank, it takes a lot to be a teacher. And it takes a lot to be a parent and a teacher all at the same time. Even though those roles kind of, do mesh together sometimes, particularly when you have to consider the livelihood aspect of it as well. But the fact that sometimes the decision feels like we're putting our children at jeopardy and are also putting our jobs at jeopardy, and like we have to make a choice, that is an awful choice to make.
You know what I read the other day, which was an interesting, unique perspective, is that this issue, school reopenings, shouldn't be a school issue. It shouldn't be a teacher issue. It shouldn't be a parent issue. This perspective of this article was that it's an economy issue, which is that so many people, like you said, are literally forced to go to work. And so they and you have some parents who maybe don't feel forced to go to work, but still don't prefer to be at home while their kids are online learning. Because like I said, that's not fun sometimes. But then you have the percentage of Americans who really literally can't afford to not go to work, and to have emergencies at home as often as maybe there will be because kids are, and so it was a different perspective of looking at it as an economy issue and not or job force economy issue,
Yeah.
um, rather than a school issue. And that almost makes sense to me because the, we don't want to feel like schools are just a play, just daycares, right? Like they really
Right.
aren't. They do so much more than that. But right now, it just because the top issue or one of the top issues is that parents need to get back to work. So there's so many, and there really is no one perfect solution. That's the problem here, right? With everything, there's going to have to be some sacrifice, and I hope that the sacrifice, we wouldn't be okay with the sacrifice being life, right?
Mhm. And PJ went on to respond, it's possible and absolutely necessary. I'm both a parent and a teacher. And I think you were referring to, PJ, correct me if I'm wrong, just stopping and taking a pause on moving forward on school reopening and just really understanding the situation a little bit better. Um, Most of the essential workers are Black and brown people. Folks are having to choose between feeding their families and staying healthy. Yeah, absolutely. We're highlighting a lot of our economic injustice, racial injustice. A lot of that is at the center and at the heart of these conversations as well, because perspective that was given to me even a couple of weeks ago is that there are certain communities that don't have to worry about making the choice. You know, that they have either the means or um, the resources to go ahead and not worry about whether schools are going to reopen or not, because they can figure out alternative measures. And then on the other side of that, I was part of a conversation last night where I saw a group of Black and brown folks that were figuring out how to homeschool. And so they're coming together as groups. People are deciding what they can teach and what they can do. And so they're finding a different alternative about not sending their kids back to school, but also just finding their own ways to educate their children and do it from a community-based perspective. And so I thought that was a really interesting concept. I actually absolutely love it because often, I'll say this: white supremacist culture, white dominant culture will require binary options. You either do this or you do this. And so the fact that they found a third way or a different alternative to handle the situation, I thought was cool. Now, again, not everybody has access to a group of people that might be willing to do this, but I thought it was an interesting. It was an interesting way of just tackling the issue and being proactive in a very different and different way of thinking.
Yeah.
I imagine there will be a major rise of child neglect because of the parents who will have to leave underage children at home alone all day.
That's a fear. That's a fear of mine. I know that I taught sixth grade last year, and that was the case. The sixth graders were in charge, and they had younger siblings, and that's scary. I mean, I know that there are laws. Is it 14, 13, or 14 in Missouri? Is the youngest you can be to be at home alone. But I think it's older if you're in
Yeah.
charge of other. And I know that's, we stayed home alone when we were younger and we took care of our siblings. But as a safety issue, like Martin brought up earlier, that's scary. I know that. Um, yeah, that's definitely a concern as well.
I love to ask our community too. So, what do you think is driving the decision making? It's interesting to hear perspectives on like what do you think is at the center of these conversations? Is it students? Is it parents? Is it teachers? Is it money? Is it funding? I'd love to hear perspectives on that. And then Latasha responded with 11. She believes.
11. Got it.
Yeah. Latchkey is different than a full 8 to 10 hour day.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. You know what, Edgar? I have a question that maybe I should know the answer to. Um, but I know that our administration, our federal government is pushing for schools to open. So Betsy DeVos has been outspoken about wanting schools to reopen. President Donald Trump has done the same. What is the motivating factor there? Because I told my husband, I was like, where, because I think money, right? But where is the loss of money if schools don't open for them? Economics,
We
yeah.
have some
So
agreement there. Economics, money is always at the center.
where's the
Elizabeth, thanks for joining us. Money. Um, the fact that we can place dollar signs and attach them to students, I think that that's part of the problem. The fact that funding is structured around attendance,
yep.
and how many students you have on average and all the other stuff. Um, the fact that we were able to convert, I guess, children into a commodity. I could be using that word wrong, but that's what's coming up right now. Um, when school Monica, thanks so much for joining us. Monica Curl is one of my
Monica.
favorite people in the world. Thanks for joining us. Economics, of course. Tasha says, when schools open, then companies can justify bringing people back to work. Whew. You got Roberto. Roberto, what's up? LEC board
Roberto.
member. Good to see you, my friend. Profits over people. Martin, money and the emergency teaching that happened was not effective. And so it looks like I think we have some consensus in our community that money is a driving factor in all these conversations. Oof. This is capitalism doing exactly what it is supposed to do.
That's deep. That's deep because it's so clear that the lives of our kids, the lives of our teachers are not prioritized in our country. Like that. And then you look at the statistics for COVID itself and how Black and brown people are more negatively impacted by COVID. And so then it becomes a race ethnicity issue as well.
Yeah.
So it's clear what the priorities are in our country and our society. I know
we got some hard truths to face, and I think one of the things that we all agree on is that money is driving these decisions. PJ Ruth, money, follow the money, and you end up at the 1%. And so I guess my question, as we have roughly like 8 minutes left in our conversation today, a couple of things that we want to just reiterate is one, as a community of Latinx educators, but also as a community that's inviting of Black and brown educators, and we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we're supportive and that we can elevate and activate your voices in a different way if possible. Two, I think we need to have a real conversation around money in general, and how that relates to students. And so thanks for sharing those thoughts with us, because I think that that's something that we need to talk about more actively, and then also find some maybe strategies on how to handle that. Because if that's what we're concerned about, then there's something that we need to address. Weed out the weak, Black, brown, and poor, and you know who will die first. Yeah, I've heard the terms guinea pigs again and again utilized. Their Black and brown communities are being utilized in terms of this, and that we're experimenting with their lives. And keep in mind all the ancillary service providers directly associated with schools: bus drivers, janitors, cafeteria workers. And once the kids are in school, everyone else can go back to work. This is the political motivation.
Okay, so we've heard money for sure. And then we heard a couple times now that
politics
and everyone getting back to work if kids go back to school. I know I have a friend who works at a call center, and her job has announced that they are working from home until January 2021. And so I know some of those decisions are being made at some organizations, but I was texting her and she was like, but she has 4 kids, and she's like, I don't know how I'm going to work from home when I have 4 kids who need to do distance learning. Economics, you know what? And shout out to you, Edgar, for this idea, the platform you provided today, because this is exactly what we need as an organization, is to hear from our community. Like, what are the issues that are being ignored and not being prioritized that should be prioritized? And we haven't seen any programming around why is money more important than our kids, you know?
Yeah, and let me ask that question differently as well. It's just like, how do we recenter students in these conversations? Right. Because if money is a main driving factor in this, then how do we disassociate them with dollar signs. Um, and I'm making a lot of assumptions here. This is not yet evidence based, but there's community based conversation happening. So I'm going to elevate that as also equivalent in terms of importance. And so, how do we disassociate kids from dollar signs? And then, how do we make decisions differently because of that? Particularly, and so this is another point, 25% of all students in K-12 are Latinx. 1 out of every 4 students, and that number is growing. And so when we look at who's going back to school, and actually I've read a lot of studies as well where the Latinx community is suffering, at the highest rates of COVID-19. And so to me, it's really interesting, like what that intersection does as well. Latasha, you speaking truth today. I appreciate you. Capitalism. If you all figure that out, you've literally hit the jackpot. That's a good play on words too, right there. Appreciate
that. So Edgar, we got some work to do. We're about to go fight capitalism.
Well, I mean, we've been fighting capitalism because, quite honestly, like, I heard this today. I was on a equity conversation as part of the Latino Equity Project, and they essentially equated capitalism to white supremacy, right? And so sometimes we have to decenter these systems. Not sometimes. We should always aim at decentering these systems, particularly if they jeopardize the lives of our communities, of Black and Brown communities, to be specific in that. And so we have a couple minutes left. If you are still with us and you have joined us, if you can just put like a comment around what's one thing that we can do as an organization to support you along your journey, because I ultimately believe that if we support our educators, we also support our students. And so that's the pathway there of change. And so I would just love to hear your thoughts on that before we end our conversation today. And the more supports the student needs, the more value that student is. Ooh. I don't know if we're ready to talk about that too.
And we're talking about monetary value.
Monetary value, yeah, because if you have additional needs, so if you are ELL, right, or if you have SPED, I think that there are additional resources that come along with you because of the budget, and so there you go.
Wow, Lori, you just spoke to us.
A SPED student receives more tax dollars for a district than a traditional student.
Wow. Ooh,
Imani, that's a great question. Are you trying to fight capitalism or trying to assimilate into it? That's a good question. We should all consider that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyways, community, thank you so much.
I don't even have words because I'm like, just thinking of the to-do list that I have right now, like all this research that I'd like to do in order to be more informed. Really, I look forward to hearing what our community has to say about what we can, the action steps that we as an organization can take in order to support you and support your students. Our priority is to ensure that we support our Latinx educators, our educators of color, and so please let us know how we can do that. I think we have a couple things that have come up, right?
Yeah, no, obviously we're going to have to do some more research, not more research, but we're going to have to, start having the conversation around money and what that means for students, and how do we start disassociating that, because ultimately we have to change that system, or we have to break it down in order for us to not have these conversations or have different actions in place. And then we've all had to inherently assimilate. Also, Martin, students and military parents receive big money. And we can talk about the GI Bill at some point in time too, and what affirmative action looks like for white folks. And so I think we're going to be having more of those conversations, because ultimately they impact, and these are the situations where these conversations intersect. And so here we go.
I was just thinking that about all the things that have come up today in just this 30 minutes, where school reopenings is intersecting with capitalism, it's intersecting with military families, intersecting with low income and brown and Black, so all the things we haven't heard of in this conversation of school reopenings, right? So
yeah. Well, thank you again, community. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We are actively thinking about these things and how best we can support. So please continue to let us know how we can be supportive of you and the work that you're doing. And until we meet again next time, have a great remainder of your evening.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye.